June 6th, 1944. Dawn breaks over the English Channel. A gray, churning sea stretches to the horizon, hiding the mightiest invasion force in human history. Nearly 7,000 vessels, warships, troop transports, landing craft carry over 150,000 soldiers toward the beaches of Normandy. For months, Allied leaders have planned this moment in secrecy, gambling everything on a single throw of the dice. If the invasion succeeds, the road to Berlin lies open. If it fails, the war could drag on for years, and Nazi Germany might yet claw its way to survival. In our reality, D-Day became a triumph, a turning point that sealed Hitler's fate. But in this alternate history, fate tilts the other way. The day that was meant to change the war instead becomes a nightmare of blood and fire, an allied disaster that shakes the world. The signs of doom begin early, in the cold, pre-dawn hours, as waves of paratroopers leap from lumbering C-47s into the darkness over Normandy. The winds shift unexpectedly. Strong crosswinds scatter the airborne divisions far from their drop zones. Entire units land miles from their objectives, if they land at all. Some plunge into flooded fields and drown under the weight of their gear. German flak tears through the night sky, shredding planes and men alike. The skies over France, meant to be a corridor of Allied precision, turn into chaos. At sea, the situation worsens. Heavy Atlantic swells and thick morning fog disrupt the landing schedules. Landing craft, crammed with soldiers, wallow in the waves, their helmsmen struggling to find the beaches through smoke and confusion. Naval gunfire, intended to pulverize the German defenses, overshoots its targets. The bunkers and pillboxes of the Atlantic Wall, bristling with machine guns and artillery, remain grimly intact. Then comes the slaughter. As the first waves of landing craft grind onto the sands of Omaha and Utah, the ramps drop and men step into hell. German machine guns chatter from the bluffs, scything through the ranks of infantry. Mortar shells rain down, sending geysers of sand and blood into the air. Tanks meant to support the assault sink beneath the waves before they can reach the shore. Engineers carrying demolition charges are cut down before they can blast the obstacles barring the way. The beach becomes a charnel house, a landscape of shattered bodies and burning wreckage. On Gold, Juno, and Sword, the British and Canadian sectors, the story is scarcely better. Stiff currents scatter the landings. Some units come ashore miles from their objectives. German counterfire pins them on the sand. Communications collapse as radios are smashed or drowned. Commanders, blind and deaf, grope for control as the tide turns red. By noon, it is clear. Operation Overlord, the gamble on which the Allies staked the fate of Europe, is failing. General Eisenhower, hunched over a field map in a command trailer in southern England, listens in grim silence as reports crackle over the wireless. Casualties soar. Landing craft burn. Entire battalions vanish beneath the guns of the Atlantic Wall. The vital foothold on which liberation depends is crumbling under relentless German fire. And across the channel, in a command bunker at Margaville, Adolf Hitler receives the news with a surge of triumph. For months, he had fretted over the Allied threat, convinced that the invasion would come at Calais. Now, as reports of carnage pour in from Normandy, he allows himself a rare smile. The enemy has dashed itself against the walls of Fortress Europe and shattered. Yet even as Hitler exults, others grasp the deeper truth. The failure of D-Day is not the end of the war, but the beginning of a darker, bloodier chapter. For the Allies, the nightmare is only beginning. With the beaches of Normandy running red, with their armies in tatters and their plans in ruins, they face a stark choice: retreat into the sea and abandon the dream of liberating Europe, or hurl yet more lives into the furnace in a desperate bid to salvage the invasion. In this world, D-Day does not end with victory parades and triumphal headlines. It ends with a broken army, a shattered hope, and a question that will haunt the future. What now? June 6th, 1944, ends in smoke, blood, and bitter despair. By nightfall, the beaches of Normandy are littered with wreckage, burning landing craft, twisted tanks, and thousands of lifeless bodies. The Atlantic Wall, battered but unbroken, stands as a grim monument to German resolve. For the Allies, the greatest gamble of the war has ended in catastrophe. The retreat begins under cover of darkness. Royal Navy destroyers edge toward the beaches to haul away what remains of the assault forces. Landing craft, riddled with bullet holes, groan under the weight of the wounded. Men stumble aboard, dazed and hollow-eyed, their uniforms soaked in blood and seawater. Behind them, the dead lie where they fell, washing back and forth in the tide. For every soldier saved, another is left behind. There is no time for dignity, no time for graves, only escape. By dawn on June 7th, the last Allied craft vanish into the gray Channel waters. The invasion fleet limps back to England, its decks piled high with the broken remnants of an army. In the harbors of Portsmouth and Southampton, stretcher bearers hurry along the quays as hospital ships disgorge their cargoes of shattered men. Military police seal the docks, but rumors leak like smoke. Whispers ripple through the barracks and factories. The landings have failed, and with each whisper, morale crumbles. In Washington and London, the mood is grim. Telegrams flash across the Atlantic, coded words masking a truth too bitter to speak aloud. Overlord defeated, casualties catastrophic. In Downing Street, Winston Churchill paces the cabinet war rooms, his cigar burning to ash between trembling fingers. "We have sustained a colossal disaster," he mutters, voice low but heavy with fury. But this is not the end. Across the ocean, President Roosevelt receives the same news with stony silence. The hope of crushing Nazi Germany in 1944 has evaporated in a single day. For Eisenhower, the burden is crushing. The supreme commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force sits in his headquarters, face gray with exhaustion, and drafts the statement he had hoped never to release, an admission of failure, an appeal for courage. If any blame or fault attaches to the attempt, it is mine alone. History will remember those words, but in this alternate reality, they are not a footnote. They are the prelude to a crisis of trust that shakes the Allied command to its core. Meanwhile, in Berlin, the mood could not be more different. In the Reich Chancellery, Adolf Hitler exults. For months, his generals warned that the invasion would be decisive, that if the Allies secured a foothold, the Reich was doomed. Now those fears have turned to ashes. The beaches of Normandy are a slaughterhouse, the Channel a graveyard for Allied ambition. In the Wolf's Lair, champagne flows as Hitler boasts to his entourage. They thought they could conquer Fortress Europe. They have learned the price of their arrogance. Yet beneath the triumph, shadows stir. Field Marshal Rommel, architect of the Atlantic Wall, warns that the victory may not be final. They will try again, he tells his staff, somewhere, somehow, unless we strike first. But his words fall on deaf ears. Drunk on victory, Hitler believes the West has broken its sword. He orders the Wehrmacht to turn its full fury eastward. In his mind, the war can still be won if the Red Army is crushed before the Allies recover. The shockwave of D-Day's failure reverberates far beyond Europe. In Moscow, Stalin slams his fist on the table as reports reach the Kremlin. He had demanded a second front for 3 years, and now his allies have failed him. Suspicion hardens into rage. The British and Americans are cowards, he snarls. They bleed us white while they tremble on their island. Soviet armies continue their relentless drive toward Poland, but Stalin's trust in his Western partners lies in ruins. The seeds of a future Cold War are sown amid the wreckage of Normandy, and in occupied Europe, despair deepens. Resistance fighters who prayed for liberation now face the iron certainty of German vengeance. In the forests of France, partisans brace for the Gestapo's wrath. In the death camps of Poland, the chimneys roar without pause, their smoke staining the summer sky. For millions who dreamed of freedom, the nightmare stretches on. But even in defeat, the Allies cannot surrender. Plans shift with ruthless urgency. Another invasion, elsewhere later, at unimaginable cost, must be prepared. Factories thunder with renewed fury. American shipyards launch vessel after vessel. In Britain, young men still queue for uniforms, grim-faced, jaw-set. They know the price of failure. They know what is at stake. And across the Atlantic, a single chilling question takes root in every council chamber and war room. If we cannot storm the beaches of Europe, how do we bring Germany to its knees? In the next part, we will follow the desperate choices that shape this alternate future. Hitler's bold counterstroke in the east, the Allies turn to fire and steel from the sky, and the dark horizon that looms when victory slips away. The guns of Normandy have fallen silent, but their echoes shake the world. For Hitler, the crushing defeat of the Allied invasion is proof of destiny. His faith in victory, battered after Stalingrad and Kursk, flares anew like a dying ember fanned into flame. The Führer strides through the map room of the Wolf's Lair, fingers stabbing at the Eastern Front. Now we strike. The West is broken. Russia must fall before they rise again. His words are iron, his eyes blazing with a fever that his generals know too well, the fever of a man who gambles everything on one last throw of the dice. The plan takes shape in the dim corridors of OKW headquarters. Codenamed Operation Sturmhammer, it is audacious, almost suicidal. A massive summer offensive to smash the Red Army and reclaim the initiative in the east. Panzer divisions, bloodied but unbroken, will spearhead the thrust across Belarus, driving toward Moscow in a lightning strike reminiscent of 1941. Behind them, new wonder weapons promised by Hitler, jet fighters, guided rockets, the fearsome Tiger II, will rain terror on Soviet lines. In Berlin, the propaganda machine roars to life, proclaiming the Bolsheviks shall drown in their own blood. But the Reich fights on borrowed time and stolen strength. The Wehrmacht is a skeleton draped in steel, divisions at half strength, supply lines fraying, fuel stocks perilously low. Yet Hitler demands the impossible, and in July 1944, the German war machine lurches forward once more. Columns of armor grind eastward through the dust of the steppes, banners snapping in the wind. At first, success seems possible. Soviet outposts crumble under the hammer blows of panzers. Prisoners march west in ragged columns. The old myth of blitzkrieg flickers back to life. In Moscow, Stalin rages. His dream of a quick German collapse has turned to ash. Furious orders lash through the Soviet command structure. Hold at all costs, not one step back. The Red Army digs in like a wounded bear, baring its fangs. Every village becomes a fortress, every river a line of fire. The summer sky darkens with the smoke of burning cities as Stalin throws men and steel into the inferno. By August, the fields of Belarus are graveyards of tanks, littered with twisted hulks and shattered lives. Meanwhile, in the West, the Allies reel from disaster. Normandy is a wound that will not heal. In Washington, Roosevelt faces a storm in Congress. Isolationist voices, long muted, rise again. How many more suns must we drown in foreign sands? In London, Churchill speaks to a weary nation. We have suffered a grievous setback, but let no man doubt, we shall rise again. Yet beneath the bulldog's growl lies a gnawing fear. Britain's strength is spent. Another invasion will take months to prepare, and the world may not have months to spare. The Allied answer is fire from the sky. If men cannot breach Hitler's fortress, then flames will. From the runways of East Anglia and the tarmac of Italy, bombers thunder into the night, their bellies a-heavy with death. Hamburg, Munich, and Berlin become furnaces, their streets running molten with fire. The Reichstag stands like a blackened skeleton against the glow of a burning capital. But even as the bombs fall, German factories churn on, deep underground, spewing out weapons for a war that refuses to end. Across occupied Europe, despair curdles into fear. The Gestapo tightens its grip, hunting partisans like wolves. In Paris, resistance fighters are dragged through the streets in chains. In Warsaw, the people rise too soon and pay in blood, their city crushed beneath German steel as Allied help never comes. In the camps, the smoke never stops. Each day bought by Hitler's defiance is another day of horror for millions. By autumn, the Eastern Front is an ocean of mud and misery. Sturmhammer stalls amid rain and fire. The Red Army, bruised but unbroken, launches a counterblow of staggering ferocity. From the forests of Smolensk to the banks of the Dnieper, the land shakes with the fury of a war without mercy. German divisions bleed white, their dreams of Moscow drowning in the mire, yet Hitler refuses retreat. Victory or death, he roars, even as death closes in on every side. For the Allies, time is the enemy. If the Reich holds through winter, the war may rage into 1946 or beyond. Desperation breeds dark whispers in Washington and London, whispers of a weapon unlike any other, a sun forged in man's hands, a fire to end all fires. In the deserts of New Mexico, scientists labor in secret, their calculations etched in chalk and fear. If they succeed, the world will never be the same. If they fail, democracy may perish in the shadow of a swastika. The failure of D-Day has turned World War II into a different beast, longer, bloodier, and far more uncertain. The question now is not who will win, but what will survive when victory finally comes. The autumn rains of 1944 soak the battlefields of Europe in mud and blood. Operation Sturmhammer, the desperate German bid to shatter the Red Army, lies broken on the plains of Belarus. The last thrust toward Moscow has ground to a halt. leaving behind a wasteland of wrecked tanks and frozen corpses. German soldiers, gaunt and hollow-eyed, huddle in trenches that stink of smoke and death. For them, the war is no longer about glory or victory. It is about survival. Yet in Berlin, reality bends to the will of one man. Hitler refuses to admit defeat. In the echoing halls of the Reich Chancellery, his rants grow more feverish, his orders more detached from reason. The Allies are finished, he snarls, jabbing at a map with trembling fingers. One more blow, and they will sue for peace. Around him, ministers and generals nod, their faces masks of obedience. They know the truth. The Reich stands on the edge of the abyss, but to speak it is to invite death. The Allies, too, are trapped in a storm of desperation. The humiliation of Normandy has left scars that no speech can heal. Churchill growls defiance before the Commons, but his words cannot mask the truth. Britain is exhausted, its manpower bled white. Roosevelt, weakened by illness and political strife, clings to one hope, the secret being forged in the deserts of New Mexico. In a cluster of low, windowless buildings at Los Alamos, scientists work with manic intensity, their blackboards crowded with equations that dance like spells. The Manhattan Project is no longer a race against time. It is a race against extinction. If the atomic bomb cannot end the war, then the war may end civilization itself. Meanwhile, the air war becomes a campaign of annihilation. From the skies over the Reich, death falls nightly in incandescent waves. Cities vanish in firestorms that boil rivers and melt steel. Dresden, Cologne, Stuttgart, names that once sang with music, now howl with the screams of the dying. Entire neighborhoods are reduced to ash and bone, yet still the Nazi war machine crawls on, burrowing into mountains, hiding in the dark veins of the earth. From secret caverns in Bavaria and the Harz, jets streak into the sky like silver knives, and V-weapons arc toward London in trails of flame. Each strike is a reminder. Germany is beaten, but not broken. On the Eastern Front, winter descends like an iron shroud. The Red Army, swollen with men and metal, hurls itself westward in a relentless tide. Town after town falls beneath the Soviet hammer, their names consumed in a blur of vengeance. Behind the lines, NKVD squads purge traitors and cowards, their pistols cracking like ice in the night. For Stalin, mercy is treason. His wrath drives his armies as surely as gasoline drives their tanks. In the West, Hitler plots one last gamble. If he cannot destroy the Red Army, perhaps he can break the Allies. The plan is as audacious as it is insane. A winter offensive through the Ardennes, a thrust to the Meuse that will split the Anglo-American armies and seize Antwerp. We will smash them like eggshells, he roars, pounding the table. His generals blanch, but the orders stand. In the frozen dawn of December, the guns speak again, and the Ardennes erupt in fire. Caught off guard, the Allies stagger. American troops in their foxholes wake to a storm of steel and snow, their lines ripped open by panzers draped in white camouflage. Bastogne becomes a name carved in blood, a fortress in the snow where men fight and die with frozen fingers on frozen triggers. For a moment, it seems as if the miracle Hitler dreams of might come true, that the West might crack and sue for peace. But the miracle dies in the snows of Belgium. The German spearheads, starved of fuel and strangled by Allied air power once the skies clear, grind to a halt amid the smoking wreckage of their own ambition. By the turn of the year, the truth is undeniable. Germany is dying. Yet like a wounded beast, It fights with a ferocity born of despair. Cities crumble, armies burn, the world reels on the brink of madness. And in the deserts of America, a new sun prepares to rise, a sun that will cast its light, not in warmth, but in fire and death. In the final chapter, we will watch that sun ascend. We will see the war's last convulsions, the fall of Berlin, the shattering of Japan, and the birth of a world where D-Day's failure changed everything, except man's hunger for victory. January 1945. Europe is a continent of ruins. From the Atlantic coast to the gates of Moscow, cities lie broken under blankets of snow and ash. The great gamble in the Ardennes has failed. Hitler's dream of splitting the Western Allies has bled out in the frozen forests of Belgium. The panzers that once thundered across France are smoking skeletons littering the snow. Yet even now, the Führer rages in his Berlin bunker, hurling phantom armies across maps with a trembling hand. Reality has no dominion here. Hitler no longer commands a nation. He commands a death cult, dragging Germany into the abyss. The Allies close in on all sides. In the east, the Red Army surges forward like a tidal wave, its guns thundering day and night. From the frozen Vistula to the plains of Silesia, Soviet troops march through a wasteland of fire and vengeance. Villages vanish beneath barrages of artillery. Columns of German refugees choke the roads, their carts heavy with what little life they can carry. In every town, the NKVD arrives with its ledger of blood, and the reckoning begins. In the West, the Anglo-American armies grind inexorably toward the Rhine. Their men are tired, their hearts heavy with the memory of Normandy, but the steel of their resolve is unbroken. Bombers darken the skies over Germany, raining ruin without pause. The glow of burning cities lights the night like false dawns. Berlin itself trembles under the hammer of Allied bombs, its streets choked with rubble, its people huddled in cellars that stink of smoke and fear. And yet, even as the Third Reich burns, its leader dreams of miracles. Hitler speaks of new weapons, rockets, jets, even atomic bombs that will sweep his enemies from the earth. But the miracle he craves belongs not to him, but to his enemies. In the deserts of New Mexico, the Manhattan Project has reached its terrible conclusion. Scientists watch in awe and dread as the sun blooms on the horizon, hotter than 1,000 deserts. In that blinding instant, the future is forged in fire. The decision comes in March 1945. Roosevelt is dead. Truman sits in the Oval Office, his jaw set in grim determination. The Allied High Command lays the options before him: invade Germany at the cost of 1 million lives, or end the war in a single monstrous stroke. The president signs his name with a hand that trembles only once. April 12, 1945, dawn over the Ruhr. German soldiers crouch in shattered trenches, clutching rifles that feel like relics from another age. Civilians huddle in ruins, praying to a god who has long since turned his face away. Then the sky blooms with an unholy light. For a heartbeat, the world is silent. Then comes the roar, a sound that shatters heaven and earth. A fireball rises above the horizon, devouring clouds, ripping trees from the ground, melting steel like wax. Where once stood a city, there is now only a crater glowing like the heart of a dying star. The first atomic strike in history falls not on Hiroshima, but on Cologne. The message is unmistakable: surrender or perish. Yet Hitler, raving in the bunker, refuses to yield. Germany will rise from the ashes, he shrieks, as if sheer will can conjure armies from the smoke. But Germany does not rise, it burns. A second bomb falls on Dresden, a third on the outskirts of Berlin. The Reich, that once sought to last 1,000 years, ends in a storm of fire after 12. On May 1st, 1945, Soviet troops storm the ruins of Berlin. They find only ghosts, shattered walls, smoking streets, and the twisted corpses of men who chose death over defeat. Hitler's body lies among them, a charred husk amid the rubble of his dreams. In the West, the German generals capitulate unconditionally. The war in Europe is over, but the price of victory is a scar that will never fade. In Asia, the nightmare continues. Japan, emboldened by the Allies' humiliation in France, still fights with the ferocity of a cornered beast. But now, the shadow of the atom falls upon the rising sun. In August 1945, Tokyo glows like Cologne before it. The age of nuclear war has dawned, not in our history, but in this darker world born of failure on the beaches of Normandy. And so the map of the future is drawn in fire. Europe lies divided, but not as we knew it. The Soviets, distrustful and enraged, seize half the continent in their iron grasp. The Western Allies cling to the other half, haunted by the choice that ended the war. Between them yawns an abyss of fear, deeper than any before, a Cold War colder still, for both sides wield the power to turn the earth into a cinder. This is the world D-Day's failure made, a world where hope drowned in the surf of Normandy, where victory came not with liberation parades, but with the glare of atomic suns, where the promise of peace gave birth to an age of terror. History turns on moments, moments like June 6th, 1944. In our world, the Allies won the gamble. In this one, they lost. And the world was never the same.